Perek Chav Tes. As I've explained to you a number of times, that from Perek Chavav and on, the Alter Rebbe is being a troubleshooter, right? What's such a troubleshooter? He is answering issues that a chassid has. And the essence of all of the issues is a chassid is pasha depressed. Now goes another issue. This new issue is not called Atzos, it's actually worse than Atzos. It's called Timtum. It's a second cousin of Atzos. You know, they all belong to the same family of parasites or viruses or bacteria or disease. Basically, it takes away a person's energy. Depression means not that a person is in a bad mood. A person has no mood, so mainly it's bad. But depression of the first few prakim was, he's depressed for a reason. Gashmias, Ruchnias, Avedis, why I'm not a tzaddik, my davening is not working. Perek Chav Tes, a guy, he's just frozen. You know, I have a computer that's the Alta Pfeiffer at this point, and every once in a while you never overcharge your computer and it says, not responding. That's Timtum. Finished, it freezes. Not responding. You gotta wait for the computer to relax, and it takes 25 years, and it relaxes. Sometimes it doesn't want to work. You pull out the plug and give it back. It's amazing. Finished. Timtum is not responding. It's dead. Now, when a person has Timtum, they gotta break out of it, because Timtum is atzvus, and it's a skupul l'chol min era. I mean, it's a festering ground for every type of not good thing. When you know what you are depressed about, you can deal with it. But if you have no idea why, you're just down, you have a problem. So we're going to have, and this Perek, I'm jumping to the middle, v'hasibahi. 7 lines on top of the you have 1 line. I think this v'hasiba is one of the most underemphasized lines in the whole Tanya. The Alter Rebbe tells a klal, you should know like this. You're depressed, you're down, your computer's not responding. I want to tell you a rule. Hasibi gasas haklipa. There is no such thing as no motivation without klipa. That means, in other words, boys, a human being, be'etzem, is motivated unless something stops him. Not a human being is be'etzem unmotivated unless something pushes him. This is Judaism. In the secular world, people are undermotivated unless they're inspired. Yiddishkeit says, you've got an neshama, like little kids. You ever see little kids that want to sit around? They want to run. The etzem tev of a person is to run unless there's a siba. And the sipa is always klipa. A person is depressed, a person is down, a person is undermotivated, the sipa is klipa. So Perek Chav Tes addresses this issue, but Perek Chav Tes goes now in a musar approach. When a person is depressed and cannot find the reason, so he needs to give himself musar. So Perek Chav Tes. There's one more thing that a Beinani must place counsel upon himself in dealing with these troubles. Asher. Sometimes, and in fact quite frequently. The heart gets like stone. And this is really an atzvus, but it's an atzvus for no reason. It's a sluggishness, it's a lethargy. I told this to you before. I had a student who used to tell me, I had a chair episode. I said, what's a chair episode? That I'm sitting in a chair and I can't get up. That's timtum. I just, no chayas. And that's a skupa l'chol min erad. Every bad thing comes from that. Shenasa evidence become like stone. He can't open up his heart in any way, shape, or form to do what Chasidus Chabad mandates as a way of having a relationship with the Eibishter, which is think about Hashem and davening. Skaita, she's frozen. So what's he going to do? What's he going to do? Moreover, sometimes he cannot fight with the Yetzer Hara. Lekadesh atzmei b'mutale, to sanctify himself with the permitted, which was Tanya Perek Chav Zayin. In other words, iskafia mipnei kvedas shabeliv, the heaviness in his heart. First of all, he cannot daven. Second of all, he loses his self-control. It's a state of timtum. It's a state of timtum. Says the Alter Rebbe, this is the solution that Zeir gives to a person who finds himself frozen. The Rav Mesefta Began Eden, the Rosh Hashiva in Gan Eden says, quote, a piece of wood that refuses to burn, you have to splinter it. A body that refuses to take hold of the fire of the soul has to be beaten up. What's the pshat? The light of the neshama. The light of the neshama and the intelligence of the person is not sufficiently revealed in the body to be able to dominate over the baseness, the material of the body. In other words, never think the neshama is depressed. There's no such thing as depression in the neshama. Depression is only in the goof. Why do you experience the depression as though it's in the neshama? Because it's not about the neshama, it's about the izgalus of the neshama in the goof. Though he understands in his intelligence the greatness of the Eibishter, he knows what should be happening, and it's not grasping. It's not attaching itself in his brain called kach sufficiently. He should be able to dominate the baseness and the coarseness of his heart. There's a coarseness and a denseness, not to the neshama, to the body. Says the Alter Rebbe, I want you to know, there is no depression, there is no timtum without nefesh habahamis. Finished. The neshama by itself is pure energy, pure life, pure optimism. You're down, you have a wall, break it. Now normally we break it with simcha. You beat the depression with the simcha described in Perek Chavav. Here, that's not working. The simcha is not working, and the musar is not, the tshuva, nothing is working. So when you have no choice, the Alter Rebbe is going to actually advocate. Good old Atara, Rasha, Meshukach, Mesuv, Mnuva, V'chulu, V'chulu. Says the Alter Rebbe V'asiba, the causes, Higasas HaKlipa, the denseness of the Klipa, Shemagbi, Ha'atzmo, which has lifted itself up, Al-Eid, Kedushas Nefesh, of the light and the holiness of the divine soul, and it blocks and it blackens its light. And therefore, under these circumstances alone, the Alter Rebbe, who views Musar, who views even tshuva like radiation and chemotherapy, it's poison, and he calls it a necessary evil. And he therefore says when a person does tshuva, you have to carefully control it. You can't do tshuva when you're working and you're playing. You can't do tshuva when you're learning and you're davening. When you do tshuva, you're not allowed to do anything but the tshuva. And you have to turn it on and turn it off. Remember, Sof Perek Chavav, tshuva has to be controlled. Here the Alter Rebbe is advocating, in effect, a process of tshuva, of bashing yourself, but it has to be very carefully controlled. You got to put on one of those lead outfits and localize where you want it to go, beat up on yourself with this timtum, and then stop it. Because you got to get out of the quagmire. You're stuck, not responding. Tzarich levacha, you have to break it. Ulashpil offer, to push it, make yourself feel like a rag. You feel terrible, make yourself feel worse. Now what's the point for someone who feels bad to make himself feel worse? You'll see it in Mitzvah Hashem at the end of this Perek, which is on top of page 74, and also in the beginning of Perek Chavtes, Omer Aleph, which is page 78. The Hainu this means, l'kveya itim, to fix times. Lahashpas, we push it to lower himself. This is anti-Chasidus. Chassidus is about simcha and betachon. Here you get musar in Chassidus. Break yourself. Since when can Chassidus advocate something which is anti-itself? You have to wait. Lias nivza be'einav, to be shamed in his own eyes. Nimas, disgusted with himself. Kakosav, as the pasuk says. V'leiv nishbar, and when you break your heart, and psychologically this means when you break your emotions, when you make yourself emotionally feel terrible, ruach nishbara, you break the stranglehold of the klipa, of the siba, which is gasas klipa. He has sitra achara, which is the klipa which we discussed on the line that begins with vasiba. You're breaking an extraneous barrier because the nefesh alakis is always alive. The nefesh alakis is always full of trust. The nefesh alakis is always full of joy. And here goes a chiddush nifla. Shehi ha'adam atzmei v'beinani. And in the case of a beinani, the beinani is his nefesh habahamis. Shenefesh achayunus hamachayis aguf. The animating soul which gives life to the body, he betokvas in all of its power. Kitadasas, when it was born, believe in its heart. And nimtza, it turns out, he ha'adam atzmei. In the case of a beinani, the nefesh habahamis is him, and the nefesh alakis is added to him. And he brings you what ayah, because it says in the Siddur as follows: Val nefesh alakis shaboy, the godly soul you have. Ne'emar, it says neshama, the soul shenasata, which you have given, be into me. Tehei, he is pure. Now, what does shenasata be mean? You've added it to me. What does it mean, adding it to me? That I'm not the nefesh alakis. Shenasata bi dafka. You've added it to me, dafka. Mikal zaraya. Sheha'adam atzmei, the person himself. Einenu haneshama tahid. Is not the pure neshama. The person is the nefesh habahamis. In other words, what hete do you have to beat up on yourself? You're beating up on getlachkeit. The answer is your behema. And the nefesh alakis was added to me. But then he says, Kim betzadikim. But tzaddikim are an exception. Shebahem, by tzaddikim, hulahepech, is the exact opposite. Sheneshama tahira, the shehi nefesh alakis. By tzaddikim, they are the nefesh alakis, who Adam is the person. The gufam in their body, nikra besar, Adam is called the flesh of a man, as opposed to a besar of a behema. And by them, the nefesh habahamis taka is secondary. Okamayim et Hillel Azaken letalmidav. As Hillel Azaken said to his talmidav, when he was going to eat, when he went to eat, he used to say that he's going ligmal chesed, to do chesed, im ho'aluva of ho'aniyah, the shameful and impoverished one who gufa is his body. He considered his body alien to him. He therefore said, he's doing a tzadim to his body by mesha machili, by feeding it. Who was a tzaddik gomer? He himself. He's only the nefesh halakis. He gives life to his body and to his flesh. In other words, by a tzaddik gomer, the guf is called b'sar adam. The guf is pure. The neshama is the person, and the nefesh bahamas is an extraneous thing. The evil, the animal soul, which is in his blood and his flesh, is transferred into good. And it was included in the holiness of the godly soul, mamish, b'tzadikim. So a tzaddik is not allowed to give himself mussar. A tzaddik gives himself mussar, he's beating up on getlachkeit. But you and I, don't worry about it. Now I want you to know that later on we're going to have the Rebbe's on Maimon. When we get to the end of this, I'm going to tell you this. The Rebbe says that nowadays we don't even do this mussar at all. But we're learning Tanya, so we're going to learn what the Alter Rebbe says. And when we finish, I'll tell you what the Rebbe says.